I did not check audio. There it is. All right, how are we doing on audio? I'm looking at the wrong place. Audio seems to be handling just fine. Yes, we're in good shape. Okay. A bit of an echo. Why would there be an echo? 1 second. Okay. I got one audio source coming in. The audio source is this thing on me. I've got one mic coming in. Oh, it's gone. See it. I gotta just keep reading, don't I? Okay. All right. Let's go into the channel. I think it's right there. Refresh. Super bright lights. I shouldn't have any audio come in from this. Okay. So let me just see how we're doing here, guys. Okay. And yeah, that audio is okay. There's that noise. Let me see if I can deal with that noise. Give me 1 second. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, turned it off. All right, give me 1 second to make sure. I just lost the audio. Now it's back on, and I've put some of the noise canceling on. So we'll see if the noise canceling is good. There, it's muted. Hold on one sec, guys. I'm just getting this. There's a delay. Noise canceling, it's not working. Okay, 1 second, let's turn it off. Is it off? How you doing? How is everybody? Okay. We're good. We got this camera on. Yes. Welcome to the studio here in Austin. I did not get a chance to send out an email to everybody, so we're going to be a little light today. I'll send an email at the end of today to everybody who's kind of on the list. And so let me just confirm that Instagram got the walnut method. Yes, it did. Okay. So, a lot of shaking going on here, a lot of crazy going on here. So let me explain to you a little bit about what we're going to be doing and today, and then the rest of this week, and then next week. So as you guys may know, and by all means ask questions. Here, let me put my channel on this screen. That way I can look for questions, and we are recording this. And why don't we record this in the other window as well? And okay. Oscar, every time I watch you work, I end up learning something. Awesome. That's because you are an amazing student and you're working so hard to master this stuff. It's great. Okay. Seeing my face. I see my face there. If the audio goes out, let me know. I'm a one-man show here in the studio, so goes south every now and then. Last class, last live session, we focused on the walnut method and finishing your work. And basically, the subtitle for me is how to make your anatomy knowledge useful, right? That's how do you apply it? Because there's lots of ways to apply it. And so I have a method that I think is useful, easy to train people, easy to understand, and you can advance kind of quickly with it, right? I've seen my students advance quite quickly. So that method we talked about yesterday or Monday, but within the sculpting system, there's a whole method to everything that we are trying to achieve here when we sculpt, right? And so I should have prepped this. Let me move Hudon back together. I don't like to leave him set up. Come on. Because of the weight. The weight of him here is, I mean, it's not insignificant. So I don't want to ruin, because it's all 3D printed, right? But let me go into the studio real quick, into my storage over here. And we talk about the process, right? Because for me, process is power. And so I've 3D printed, I have 3D printed all of these different stages of sculpting that I think are really kind of, important. Sorry to have my back to you. And I got one more to get. These stages are really ways of thinking. They regulate what you're supposed to be, what's supposed to be going on inside your mind. All right, because throughout the process, there's mental process as much as there's physical process, right? So in the beginning, if you're going to sit down and draw, you don't sit down and, start with details. If I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start to put something together, just, let's say if it's a figure drawing, I don't immediately go into the eyeball and be like, all right, well, there's that line for the eyeball. And then I start tracing from that. Okay, so here's the edge of the shadow as that comes down, right? Somebody might do that, but we generally don't. And the reason why is pretty simple. It's because, the how do we say it? The multiplication of errors, right? So you make a tiny error here, it's small. And by the time you got down here to the leg or to the toe, it's like this whole thing is stretched out. It's stretched out because the human brain it's not a machine. It's not like measurement, ding, and storing all of these things down. Usually. Some people, maybe, right? But what we do, I'm just getting the questions here. Yeah. What we do usually is levels of thinking about it. So if you're doing, let's say, I think any drawing, right? Some people might go and they're saying, all right, so I'm going to do the massing and then from like that, right? So here we've got what? We've got the rib cage. So, you may be able to come in depending on the orientation of it. And then you've got the hip. I don't know what's going on with this hip yet. Let's say I don't know what's going on with this, right? And so now I'm starting to have to think, like I only have this simple form, and I'm having to start to think, where is this in relation? And now I've opened up a door to the multiplication of errors. So now I'm going to go in and say, all right, let's find the ASIS, and then I'll find the pubic symphysis, right? And I've already made a mistake that I'm not even aware of yet, and I discover it later on. I've basically taken the 8th rib and the ASIS and I've put them like an inch from each other. So that's my 8th rib. I don't know if you guys can see it, my ASIS. Can I get them within an inch of each other? I mean, maybe. Ain't gonna feel good, and there's a lot of stuff going on. But the multiplication of errors is a big problem. It's one of the fundamental problems we have to deal with when we're dealing with art. And so there's a great, I have this great video. Let me see if I can find this, guys. This is actually, not video, but it's a blog post. Let me see, Kingslien Tumblr. Yes. I actually don't even know how to access this anymore. Hopefully it doesn't cut me off. It's now started to do that. Let me see, maybe there's a... I can't show you. I can't show you. I tried. There's the multiplication of errors, and then there's also stiffness. And there's also like what fits your temperament, right? So for me, I'm much more of, I like to just kind of move. And within the movement, feel it, right? And so I emphasize feeling over accuracy. Somebody else might emphasize accuracy over feeling. You can really get to the same place both ways. I don't think mine gives you more feeling. I don't think theirs gives you, necessarily more accuracy. I think you can get to the same place. But we have to start to think about the stages, what works for us, and what are the problems inherent in our stage that we work with, right? So let's say, I'm gonna get really messy. Now it's starting to shape up into something, right? Are we in the scene? You guys can see it, yeah. This is how I operate. And I like to kind of feel and move around. And so I didn't know, like, is that the bowl of the belly? Is that the bowl? The bowl of the belly is probably right there because I got to leave room in there for the genitalia, right? And now you can start to see it's like, oh, that's that slope. And then the rib cage is compressing in there. I like this process of discovery. For me, it gives me energy, right? And so then we might come in and say, all right, where's that head going to be? What's the arms doing? Let's get a little shoulder action. I don't know what's going on. Let's say, da-da. That goes there, Put those arms up. And let's say, yeah, this guy. So you got this nice swoop. So let's continue that swoop. Let's move the head of the humerus here. And we'll just keep that arm off to the side. That's going to give us a little bit of an angle. So then that arm's going to be down there. Not only that, but that is also going to shift because now our chest is like this. That's going to shift the head. So now the head's moving, more this direction. Okay, and eventually I'm going to get there. The two things that are relevant for today's conversation, one is what is the way that you enjoy learning or working, okay? And can you honor that way, in your educational journey, right? Because when I was younger, and this is what I wanted to show you guys on Tumblr, when I was younger, I believed that, every stroke had to be right. And that'll destroy years of your life, if not decades. You got to be right. It's got to be right, But I'm not the kind of person, at the end of the day, I had these two sides. One part of me was like, it's got to be right. And the other part of me is like, I don't give a fuck, it's right. Like, I'm going to go have some fun. Like, I want to have fun. And these two hate each other. So it's important to understand in your learning journey that you have multiple roles and personalities, okay? So one of the ways that this is codified, there's a great book on the success of Pixar and Disney. How do these creative industries succeed, or creative companies succeed creatively? And then some of that comes back from a book on Walt Disney. It was actually one of the 8 wise men that wrote a biography. And he said, when you met Walt Disney, you never knew who you would meet. Were you going to meet the visionary who was going to riff on ideas with you? Were you going to meet the realist who was going to try to apply a budget? Or were you going to meet the critic who just looked for problems, just holes? Any holes he could find, he was going to tell you about those holes. 3 different personalities. And Disney codified those in 3 different locations. So he would screen movies under the stairs where it's hot, there's no AC, it's cramped and crowded. And then everybody would be agitated. Because the critic by nature is agitated. He's looking for trouble. And so these are the 2 parts that were battling. There was a visionary part of me that just wanted to flow, right? I wanted something to kind of like happen, you know? It's like my teenage daughter. And, you know, she loves to talk on the phone with her friends, and she likes to have fun, and she likes to do things. And then her Indian mother, who's like, you got to study. You got to make this happen. If you're not putting in your hours, you know, why are you talking here? You haven't done this. What's your score going to be, right? She's keeping score. These are totally normal things. That's the thing that's most important for me to communicate here. It's normal for this dichotomy and this crazy to exist. If I would love now to just learn more and more and more about that. But we as creatives, we have a family. We have the critic. The critic has to be there because he's got to spot the problems. Because the visionary doesn't give a shit and is out there having fun. But if you have fun and all you have is fun, then you're not going to grow your skill, right? So the realist needs to step in and be like, dude, you know, you got 30 minutes and then get your ass back to work. And then you got to look over at the critic and be like, dude, go get a cappuccino. You're kind of being an asshat. Like, you know, chill out. We need all of these parts. When we sculpt, all right, you ready for the transition? Let me see. How do you deal? When did the stream die? Okay, I got the recording. Tell me how much you missed. What was the last thing and the next thing? And while I'm waiting, I'll have some cold-ass coffee. As far as that's cold. Yikes. But not ice. You lost like 30 seconds, you lost the best part. Did you hear me talk about internal family systems? All right, maybe I should stop streaming. But that'll be a function. I'm on Wi-Fi here, not Wise. But it's the nature of being here in this studio. Because if I bring internet in here, it's $200 a month. We don't even know if we're keeping this studio. No, I have black coffee. I'm on this diet where you don't eat for 16 hours and you eat for 8. Okay, so it's running. The idea is that we have multiple parts within us. All of these parts have to exist. You can't favor one part over the other part. You got to have a visionary, you got to have a critic, and you got to have a realist in the middle that helps you manage and get stuff done. The same is true for our process. So when we work, Sometime the critic needs to work first. Like I had a teacher, Oliver Grimley, you did the eye first. I wanted to gut myself like a fish in that class. I had so much anxiety, right? Because I have to feel. So you see here, I'm in here and I'm feeling, and there's searching lines for it. 10 years ago, I'd be pissed off at myself that I got that line wrong. Now I know that this is one stage in the process. That's all it is. This stage is all about activating a part inside of me to achieve a result. Then later on, we'll go in and we'll say, okay, we got to make it into something. So what are my tools to make this crazy something? And when you get this, when you get where I'm going with this, I think it'll change your relationship to your creativity, and my hope is your relationship to you as a creative. Because I have to do this. If I don't do this, the artwork sucks. It looks horrible. I quit sculpting because of this. If I have fun like this, I'm ready. It's like I'm the happiest person on the planet. You know, it's pure joy. So this part, this stage, I activate, the visionary in me. Now the next part, I'm going to activate the realist. And now he's got to sit down and be like, how do I get from point A to point B? What is his tools? What are his tools? Okay, and so as a figurative artist, your tools are, what options do we have? Okay, so we have landmarks. Did I just put that up above where you guys couldn't see it? Let's put a little note right there. Landmarks. If I can plot landmarks, then I can start to make something out of it, right? And trust me, we're going to do all of this in ZBrush. I'm just giving you the talky talk. Okay, there's also schematics. I'm going to say schema. I don't know why. Somebody might put in comments like, that doesn't mean that, Ryan. And I'm going to remind you that I'm being a visionary right now. It means whatever I want it to mean. I don't give a shit what Webster has to say right now. Webster can go hang out with Rodolfo, or no, my inner critic, we had to name him once. His name's Federico. There was an exercise where you can meet these parts of yourself. So my inner critic, his name is Federico, and he works for Christie's as one of the guys that's gaveling the auction. So he only sees the best artwork at the end for how much money it sells. So he's a real pain in the ass. Here, as a realist, what are my tools? Landmarks, schematics, right? And then we got to think planes. Okay? These are the intellectual tools that I apply to the next stage of trying to make this mean something. Okay, I need planes because planes become light and shadow. All right, any questions? You guys thought you were tuning in for ZBrush, right? We're going to get there. Let me make sure. Yeah. Leave a note in the comments. Let me make sure that those are still running. Okay. Landmarks. What are the landmarks of the body? Where are you going to start, right? So there's a couple of things that people do. Marshall Vandriff once taught me the constellation, right? So the constellation is you have ASIS, ASIS, pubic symphysis, then you have the belly button, nipples, and then the pit of the neck, right? And then you kind of just, it's like a constellation, okay? This is a little bit dodgier to use because you have to actually know where the nipple is. And I don't know if I got that right. Okay, a better one to use is going to be bony landmarks. Okay, because bony landmarks you can identify and reference. It's pretty straightforward. Lewis, this is recorded. Yeah. All right, so bony landmarks. Bony landmarks, I like to get centered here. In here, I actually put 3 bony landmarks, guys, because I put one for the manubrium, and then I put one on each side for the head of the clavicle, because the head of the clavicle sits up, right? So if you look at the chest area, there's the pit of the neck, there's the manubrium that comes down to the sternum, and then there's the clavicle. Okay, that relationship is really important because a lot of people miss it. So I'm going to say, all right, let's go bop, bop, bop. All right, so that's going to be pit of the neck. Can you see that okay? I don't think so. Let me try this color. That's a shit color too. Yeah, you'll probably be able to see that a little bit better. All right. Now, once we have this, this provides it starts the road for us. So now the next thing we might try to figure out is, where's the sternum going? So we might say, okay, it's not going that way. It's not going that way. Generally, you're going to find, like you treat this as a 90-degree angle. I got to get this thing out of the way. So now we're going to come and say, all right, da, 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 something like this, which you can see I've already kind of sketched out. So we're going to come down. We're going to say xiphoid process maybe, okay? And then I'll come out from here and start to find the intercostal arch, okay? Now, I'm going to go about like that, maybe like that. It depends on the direction, in which these guys are facing. Then we'll say that's about 8th rib right there. And you could just imagine like a little box. Now down from there, ASIS, across ASIS, pubic symphysis, we're in great shape, right? Okay, so now these are landmarks that are going to help us a lot more, okay? So we can come up here and the clavicle has 2 landmarks. It's got this guy and this guy. So now we're going to say, all right, well, where's the arms? Okay, because the general schematic of this would be, if you find out where the arm is, you say the head of the humerus, and the end of the clavicle is going to be right around there, So I don't know where this is. Let's see. I think we put this arm down. This arm is up, but it's actually not going to be up like that. If that's the neck and this guy's raising this up, then this whole thing actually moves up, because now that clavicle should go a bit like that. And then this is going to be down, head of the clavicle. Yeah, okay. Voila, and then that's going to move up that way, if not actually even a little bit further. Okay, so bony landmarks help us. There's also schematics that we keep in mind, like the constellation. Other schematics that we keep in mind are also things like, say, tracing the external oblique down, bowl of the belly, right? I have a schematic I like where we're going to kind of go and say, about like that, and try to create these kind of like expanding cubes, that connect along here, right? And so then this schematic makes my life a little bit easier trying to understand, what's happening here. But, and wait, before I go to the but, and then let's come down here and say, all right, there's my pubic symphysis, this is my ASIS. So wherever this is locked, we're going to do another line right here and say, all right, well, the great trochanter is like there. Okay. And let's go and say eighth rib. Let's put our eighth rib right there. Eighth rib. Okay. Now, this is what everybody talks about with anatomy, right? It's pretty typical. You guys have probably seen this conversation. Let's look. While coasting, it will help when rigging for sure. Okay, scaffolding being made, all starting from a constellation. Okay, yes. All right, so this is the anatomy most of us know. I think somebody mentioned force, which takes gesture drawing, mixes it with analytical drawing, and I forget the name of the author, but it just did like an amazing job of helping people understand dynamic movement and be able to recreate it. But we're missing something. Then that's always my thing. What are we missing? Any thoughts on what we're missing? Because there's something hidden deep inside here that was only in my mind. I didn't actually make it. I didn't actually draw it, but I thought it. And it's that stage that we want to talk about today. This we would talk about at the end of today, I think, but we want to talk about the stage that's before this. So what is that stage? So you could say form, not walnuts. Walnuts are at the end. My phone's blowing up. My daughter. Volume. You could say form. You can say mass. Most people understand volume. Because volume is like, shape is 2D, volume is 3D, it's pretty basic. Form can be like anything. It can be like weird forms. But volumes are generally primitive. And so underneath this is a series of volumes that I like to imply more than I actually like, to create. But we started here with it. Let me see if I can. See that line? That's no good. This is one of the reasons why when I do this, I like my hand to have that knowledge first, so I like to make these big movements. There, like that, right? You have to train yourself, really, which force is an example of somebody training themselves to push volumes. And so then let's say, there, all right, now, there's also volumes for the legs. So for me, I have a very specific volume. Kind of curving like that. That just really jazzes me up, right? Now I can come in and we get a superhero pose. I don't know exactly what's going on there. And then when we come up here, instead of us getting analytical about this, there's volumes for us to consider, okay? Number one, where do the arms go? How do we think about arms as volumes, okay? Because here I just thought of them as bones. And so for me, the easiest way for us to think about volumes is as though they are simplified skeletal forms. And so the humerus is not a bad volume for us, it's just too skinny. So if we're thinking about what we do with this guy, and let me get a little bit more of the energy I want. Okay, good enough for now. I want to do the arm I'm going to say bump, bump. Do it as a cylinder. Do that as a simple cylinder moving away. Try to find where is that cylinder going to connect, right? So we can say rib cage, rib cage. We can pull lines out like that and say, all right, that's probably the best place. And then, okay, now there's our volumes. You can't see that too well. But when we're trying to make something, right, whether you're trying to make it from imagination or you're trying to copy it, the most important thing that I want to communicate right now is that you have to be able to kind of see through a figure and try to interpret volumes. Let me see if I can get that down enough. I still got a little. All right, so if we're going to go in, all right, and so I'm going to kind of I'm looking at Laocoon across the way. Okay, so we're kind of getting something with Laocoon. I am continually drawing this too high for you guys. Sorry, I need to put a little marker there. Okay, so if we're going to come in and say, all right, where, how, what, all that stuff, let's get this guy's figure. You know, we got this arch of his rib cage right there. We're going to get his bowl of his belly right there. This leg is a cylinder. You know, this leg, yeah, this leg's kind of coming towards us. This leg is also a cylinder descending, right? This one's facing us a little bit more. What's this hand? This arm is actually like kind of going back, and it's like this kind of cylinder going back in space, you know, and then this guy right over here, this cylinder, wherever that thing's going. You know, trying to capture all of these volumes. His rib cage is actually a cylinder that's tipped forward. His pelvis is actually tipped and continuing that. Right? And then, yes, he's got his anatomy along this. His head is kind of a neck. It's buried underneath that beard. Can you, when you look at the figure, can you see through it to the simplified form that it has? This is what we need to start to think about, is looking at what's in front of us and breaking this down into very simple forms, all right? So we're done with the drawing side of this. Let's look at some of the sculpting to some extent. And so here I've got, let me make sure you guys can see them. Yeah. I have a bunch of them. We'll just set them off like that. All right. This is the finished one, right? And so this is based on, in the update to the Anatomy for Artists, I'm going to walk you through how I sculpt this, as well as the dynamic one. And so this is sculpted. This is not the scan. This is sculpted. And it starts here with that simple shape. These are the volumes, right? This is kind of, we're looking through whatever's here and trying to say, all right, well, within that is the volumes. We have to understand those volumes because those are the volumes, like that allows us to kind of move things and pull things around. So we have to say, okay, why does the arm not interpenetrate the rib? Well, because this arm is a personification of the humerus, and the humerus is offset via the clavicle and the scapula. It's offset from the rib cage a little bit. How much? That's what you want to learn, right? You want to get comfortable with that. Where is the pivot of the arm, the volume of the arm, right? You have to know that. And it's directly underneath the acromial process. So you'd come here and say, boom, that's the pivot. And then now that arm moves, this whole structure moves. But see through all of this. I like this example really well because the butt is this kind of tire shape that I think is, hopefully it's going to really help a lot of people. Because a lot of people think about the butt in terms of like a peach or a sphere. And you can't sculpt spheres. You have to sculpt planes. And all sculpting is just smaller and smaller planes. We're very bad at curves, generally. And that means that once you have curves like this, one of your first jobs is to turn it into a planar figure where you have a front plane, right? And then, let's see, where's my tool? And how are we doing? You guys can still hear me? So yes, okay. So here, front plane. You look at that from below. Okay. Then there's quite a clear, that's the nice front plane right there. This is a... It's 3D printed. I can always print another. Okay. Flat, 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 right? Dot, dot. Flat, flat, flat. Okay? So I have 1, I have 2, I have 3. Side plane. Okay? Then in the back, this is another transition plane right there to the back. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I see 5 planes along one side. That's coming from, let me get down on the ground for this beast. The round is now, and this is something I talk about a lot in sculpting, you have to square the round. Always square the rounds, right? But in this case, we're planing, squaring sort of the rounds. You have your volume, and from this volume, you need to extract the planes. It's the next step, right? And so just like in the drawing from before, I let all my energy out, and then once the energy's out, then I got to start figuring out, you know, what's the next step. It might be landmarks, right? It might be something else, okay? And then once we've done this, then we go and we start to find these structural masses, and this is not a good one. This one is. And I drew over this in a previous live session. So, these two, actually these 3 are what we're going to talk about today. I got to make this other one safe. We're going to talk about the volume, right? And then how we start to move that into structure by establishing the planes. Very simple way to establish planes, by the way. It's super easy once you see it. And then once we do that, then we start to move it into structural massing. All right, and this we talked about on Monday. We're going to dive into on Friday is the big day, but I'm going to hopefully introduce you to it today. The idea of structural masses is kind of the missing piece of anatomy. It's one of the ways that we make anatomy useful to us, right? Because anatomy in and of itself, it's like, you know, you're not going to perform surgery. So do you really need to know where all the nerves are? Like, it doesn't matter, right? Within this, you can kind of see, let's get these guys out of the way so they don't drop again. I've kind of marked on them the planes, 1, 2. But now what we're looking at is there's the mass of the pectoralis. I'm not getting into the anatomy, I'm getting into the mass, right? And when you think of it as a mass, then volume starts to become one of the most important things that you think about. Instead of thinking about insertion and origin, which is all the stuff you do later, I think mass. So I think, okay, I think I have the volume of the rib cage. Now I'm going to have the volume of the mass, the volume of the pecs, the volume of the intercostal arch, right? Then I might have the volume of the lat. I might come down here and I have the volume of the abs. I might have the volume of the external oblique, okay? And then as we go around to the back, the same thing holds. It's like here in terms of just simple volumes, we're establishing, you know, the foundation. But now we go in and here's my scapula mass, okay? Here's my serratus anterior and lat mass, right? And again, I'm not thinking origin and insertion, I'm just thinking mass. And so that mass is actually a wedge. And that's how I think about it, okay? But we also come down here and we start looking like, what's this? Notice how that's really a straight line. It's kind of a straightish plane. So this is the lumbar part of the spine, where what I'm building is the multifidus, the longissimus, basically the erector spinae group. They're going to be all down here and here, okay? And then this is the side wall of the rib cage. This is the 8th, 9th, 10th rib right there. The 12th and 11th are going to be hidden in here. We got the gluteal mass. The gluteal mass, you might notice, yeah. Do you see this kind of tire shape? Hopefully we're getting the same kind of tire shape. Notice the flat plane, right? So this volume now moving into more of a mass concept. You may call it form concept, I do sometimes. And then our next stage after that, which we talk about on Friday, is simply the progression of our massing, our structural massing. So here we think pectoralis, right? Here we're starting to think with the walnut methodology. We're thinking about 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 4 walnuts here for the pectoralis. You can see them in Hendrick's work of Hercules, right? The one that we use to explain this method. We come down and we start to, is that the 7th rib? 8th rib, then the external oblique, then the abs, and then, you know, what's going on here? We start to, okay, so that's 2nd rib. We start to define the clavicle, right? We start to deepen our structural massing, so to speak. And then, of course, once we're done with that, get this off of the stage. Then we go in and we refine and integrate them into a surface and into whatever musicality we're looking for. And so this system, these torsos, this is all in the update. It's all going to be in the update to the new anatomy class. And so for all of those who are who have the anatomy class, they're going to get that for free. So they're going to get, you guys are going to get the neutral torso, which this is the neutral torso. And then if you see on the cover of, if you see at kingslien.art, that dynamic one, you guys are also going to get that. So They're all going to be included. I'm updating the anatomy, and that is going to open on Monday, I think. We might open on Friday. I'm all over the map right now. But anyways, we talk about that later. Right now, we need to get into ZBrush. So let's take this down. All right. Still with me? Yes, yes. Yes, yes. Okay. Move that down and out of the way. Any questions about this volume work? Shout them out. Okay, good. All right. So here's that guy. And I'm going to give you guys like the real simple construction approach, right? So here's the reference sculpt. And the way we do this inside of ZBrush is pretty simple. I'm not going to do all of it with you. I'm just going to show you real quickly how you do this. So in ZBrush, we append a polymesh star. Let's go ahead and turn all the rest of these off. And turn solo off. Why don't we? We're going to select that polymesh star, which is right there. Then we're going to go down to initialize. We turn it into a Q cube. You could also turn it into a Y cylinder, but in this case, I'm going to turn it into a Q cube. And then if you go to geometry and you go to size, you might be a little surprised to learn that this is a place where, hold on, let me get the pen going. This is a place where right now it says 0.4, but you can use that to actually set the proportions of the rib cage, right? Portions of the rib cage, portions of the pelvis, like whatever you want. So what are the proportions of the rib cage? How tall is it? How wide is it, right? These are the things that you want to know. You want to have a sense of. So for me, I'm going to set all of that to 1, and then I'm going to set the height to 1.75, and then I might set the width to 1.25, okay? Notice that that actually fits. But one of the other things that's really important is to go into Draw and make sure that your grid size and your tile size are 4, okay? Right there. And then where's the magnify? Alt Control Z. Okay, Alt Control Z. Alt Control Z. Yeah, there you go. So you see grid size 4, tile 4, and ELV is 0. That's kind of essential. All right, and then let's turn floor on, but you got to make sure if you look in here, you'll see my floor has Y off and Z on. So you just click that to make it happen. Okay. Then let's turn the magnify off. Then if we look, it's a little hard for you to see, you know, and probably especially with this being on the interwebs. I'm going to set my frame opacity to, you know, basically 1. Now you're going to be able to see it a little better, but it'll really slow things down, so I'm not going to do that too much. What you just have to keep in mind, good Lord. Oh, hitting the wrong thing. This is 1, 2 heads, right? So you should have head, and then you should have feet. We're using the 8-head proportion. So our model is not 8 heads, but we're kind of sticking close, you know, to this. And so right here at the 3, that's where your rib cage is going to sit. So we're going to take that and you move that up. So the bottom of it sits on 3. And then you do the exact same thing. You just come in and you say append polymesh, select it, initialize, turn it into a cube, geometry, size, set all the size to 1, and then I set the Z depth to 0.8, right? And then the one caveat with this is that we want it to sit so that the, if you were to divide that into thirds, that line is going to bisect the thirds. That should be the pubic symphysis right there, come up to the ASIS right there, okay? And this needs to be a little bit wider too, if we're going to match that guy. And so right there we have our stereometric model. Of course, you got to rotate, you know, there's a little bit more movement going on in there. But that would be the beginning of a stereometric representation. And so, you know, that's not the only stereometric representation. Like, let's take a look at DIR. Oh man, you look for it and now I can't find it. Yeah, you kind of see it. All right, look at this. Look at this. This is an artist, contemporary, if I remember right, of Leonardo, trying to figure out how to describe the human body as a simple solid, right? This is the process that later developed in stereometric work. And if you look at Roberto Osti, let me close out a few things so I don't get in trouble and show something somebody doesn't want me to show. Close that. Okay, I think I am fine. I don't think, yeah, I won't expose anything. Okay, cool. If we look at Roberto's work, he's big time into stereometric drawing. Let's see, where do you got it, Roberto? You should have more of it all over the place. You can see it here. See where he's making them into mannequins, right? And this is the volumetrization of the body, which again, they've been doing, you know, since DIR. This guy has been doing this for a long time, trying to figure out how to make the human body into, you know, three-dimensional solid that he can represent in all sorts of ways. Let's say proportions. I think he's got something under proportions. Look at that. Look at all that information that he's trying to extract, trying to capture, you know? Because again, like we said on Monday, these artists were directors. And they were creating 3D effects, and so this is how they paid their bills. This is why they were renowned, is because they could create this. Nowadays, nobody cares that, you know, we can create these things. They're just like, oh, whatever, dude. So we take this and we start to work on a stereometric figure. That's the basic idea, you know. And so it starts essentially with these volumes that we have here. And then once we have these volumes, the next step for us is to go in and start to divide them or start to shape them, so to speak. So if I was to go in and do that, to start to establish the look, like let's go and say split, and then let's make these guys all part of one. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to be real simple here in the beginning. We just want to start to capture the volumetric aspect of a rib. I'm going to use move topological. And this is an exercise, you know, you know, in my view, you have to do. Where's C7? I'm going to turn perspective off. C7's right there. Where's the pit of the neck? Right there. And I like to keep it low res like this, because when you keep it low res, it makes you think about the form a little bit more. Bottom of the rib cage, probably right there. There you go. Let's move that down a little bit. And then I'm going to change the orientation of that topology, about like that. Okay, I like ZModeler, so I'll go in and add like a little bit more geometry to start to capture a little bit more of this. And then of course we can go in and say geometry, dynamic subdiv, and just see like how far it, you know, do we lose anything? Is it holding up? So that rib cage, that's holding up. The bottom could be pulled down. That intercostal arch. Let's go to the pit of the neck. That's all way too high. High in the front, higher in the back. C7 right there, right? And then what's our sternum? What's the front of this thing doing? Cool. Okay. And then you want to do the same thing for the pelvis. But we need to become, all of us, we need to become students of different form concepts, different ways to think about these volumes, right? And so for me, Gottfried Balmas is one of the best people. He's a light in the dark ages that he just kept it going. He kept all of this moving forward, right? So these volumes like this, or you could see the pelvis, let's see if we've got anything linked to the pelvis directly. Yeah. We can get more complex like this, but this doesn't serve our purposes in the very beginning. You know, he's got drawings down here that start to get this a little bit more, you know, explanatory in terms of its shape. But ultimately, it's a bucket, which you can see in his book here. And this one I really like, right there. So he's capturing the stomach in there a little bit, and you just have, at the end of the day, a tapered bucket. That's like, there's not too much more magic to that, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a tapered bucket. So now those form concepts, we bring this in and we're like, all right, well, let's turn dynamic off for a moment. And we say, all right, well, how do we do that? Start to round it. Round it. Round it in the back. I'm not a big fan of rounding it too much. Right, and then we can come in and say, let's inset. So I'm just using ZModeler. And now if I dynamic that, you know, we start to have shapes. What's going on there? Oh, that's a problem. But is it a problem? I don't really know if I really care. Tilt it. It needs to open. But not so much, like you can see. And let's use move topological. His ASIS, let's find his sacrum. Yeah, that whole pelvis needs to move back. Let's go ahead and turn split off. There you go. Look at it and say, all right, let's get that sides lined up, and then come in and see, when we're looking at the pelvis, we say ASIS, right? And then, does anybody know what this one back here is called? Between those, the wings of the ilium come up, plateau, and then drop. Then we're going to have the pubic symphysis. Then we're going to start to have the ischial spine. And right there's the great trochanter with the leg. All right? So any idea what this is about? This is the PSIS, posterior superior iliac spine. So now, when we're thinking volumes, and then if we really want to, now we can just apply this. We can divide it. And again, if you want to, you can go further with Bomis's, if we go back to Bomis's example here, you could cut a wedge. Here, let's do this a little bit easier on people, Ryan. And dam standard. And if you really want, you can go in with H polish. Where'd you go? Right there. And you can make this pretty. But I'm 50-50 doing that live. I am 100% like when you're doing this on your own, absolutely make things pretty. Because the aesthetics creates meaning, right? There you go. Okay. So now this is a central basic volume within the body, and you want this simple volume in your figures, right? You also, you know, we're going to want the rib cage and all of that stuff as well. When we have those simple volumes, it opens up so much more to our expressive potential, and it creates a scaffold that allows us eventually to just invent, you know, from our imagination. So when I was drawing earlier, I had the volume in my mind, and then I was growing out from that, whatever the figure could be, you know. And the same thing's also true for when we sculpt, right? So say, for example, if I've got, should we try a Spider-Man pose? So I love doing Spider-Man poses, but they're so hard. I think we should. I think we should. Okay. Let's find some Spider-Man. Like that. Should we try to create a pose similar to this? What do you guys think? Give me a shout out. And what are we at? We're at an hour now. Yeah, I think this will wrap it up. Like, this will give you a nice conversation of the importance of volume, and as we kind of move in and learn about structure. Avery's like, yes, but Avery, you have a class tomorrow, so do you really want to stick around? Gift 1883 is down. Okay. All right, so I'm going to move this off to the side. and see if I can't, and I can invent it in a couple of different ways. So that's off to the side. Let's open up ZBrush. And I think we should do this with Z spheres. No, I think the coolest, hardest way is to do this with a sphere. Yeah, let's go into this polymesh sphere. Can we turn this sphere into Spider-Man? All right, yes we can. Yes we can. Yes we can. Everybody's like, I don't like those classes. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the beam. Okay, a universal. I learned this from Marshall. This is as I learned the constellation from Marshall. I learned this from Marshall. I do a couple things because I'm a sculptor. I put the pelvic plane in there. Like, I don't know if that'll make sense to you guys, but I don't know if you see it. But I really like to have a box right there. It's kind of my jam. Okay, and then I really like to have a sense of the rib cage. And Spider-Man is actually not a man, he's a boy. So, you know, he's actually a little on the skinnier side. Or maybe Peter Parker is a man. You know, my favorite is Into the Spider-Verse. My daughter and I love that one. All right, so let's go and pull out some shapes. Okay, fine. What was that all about? Okay. I'm going to use Dynamesh a lot. So we're going to go Dynamesh, and that's going to add my geometry in there. And then I'm going to do the same thing here in the legs, where I just pull out a bunch of crazy. And then we pull out the why don't we pull out the neck? Okay, Dynamesh that. There you go. Okay. So we have essentially clay on the armature. Let me just check my proportions real quick, if you don't mind. I'm going to go floor. And I'm going to try to position him so the genitals... don't do that. There. So even though I am working with this idea, I'm still creating like a base mesh. And, you know, you could have a base mesh that you pose. You could have a mannequin that you pose. I'm actually kind of creating a base mesh from scratch, and then I'm going to pose that base mesh because today's conversation is about volume. So I want to show you how you make volume first, and then it becomes really easy. If you understand how the volumes operate, how they connect, the Spider-Man's not that. It's not as complicated as it seemed. I mean, it is some tough stuff, but... And I say that, and then next thing you know, it's all going to suck. Starting to see the human. Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy what a little bit of gesture does? shoulder in the back. And get a little bit of the hand. See how when I flatten that plane, do you see that plane that got flattened? This is why I do it, is it's instant realism. Okay, now the rest of this needs some work. So let's take this guy and let's leave him about like that. Yeah, I'm going to focus on just torso, right? And I think we should focus just on this as well. Uh, 1.5 deltoid, cool. Okay, let's dynamesh that. There you go. All right, let's get rid of the floor. Our proportions are largely okay. I'm going to just round it and smooth it. That's what I do. I round and smooth. Okay, same here. Inflate it, smooth it. Inflate it, smooth it. Okay, I'm just trying to get, and then once we've got that kind of like out of the crazy, then we can start talking about the individual volumes, right? And so this is a phase where a lot of people start to go wrong, because as you saw when we started this, we started focusing on the drawing, and we immediately went to the landmarks. I didn't have structure yet. I didn't have volume yet, right? So I could go in, and many people will go in like this, and they'll say, all right, well, let's start doing landmarks. And you can get by with this, but my argument with you, my argument about that, not with you, I like you, but my argument with this is that if you haven't learned the volumes, all of this is going to go to hell in a handbasket. Like, it's not going to stay. It's going to shift, and you're not going to understand why it shifted. When the reason it shifted is super, super, super simple. You don't have the volumes right. So some people will teach you, and I do this too, we teach you, look at the cross sections, okay? So let's look at the cross sections. If we come in and we look right here, we can go double. And it's like, all right, well, that's the cross section. Is that a rib? Do we have a sense of the rib in there? And the answer is, yeah, maybe, maybe not, okay? If you start putting in the scapula mass and you don't have all that stuff done, like, it's a problem. Okay, so let's focus right now on volume. And if we go back to this, I'm going to say front plane is right here. This is what I teach you guys in the class. We go from the clavicle down to the nipple, out to 8th rib, and then that just becomes a front plane. It's kind of nice. Okay, and then we come in and we look at the side and we're like, that is a backwards facing side plane. I like that. And I will keep that. And then this becomes the first transition plane that you make. Transition meaning it's not front, it's not side, it's like a 3/4 plane. Oh, I can't sculpt with that. That's such a sucky. There we go, thank God. I can breathe a sigh of relief. We got these landmarks, but If you get into this too soon, it's just a game of back and forth, basically. So I'm going to now go in and instead of focusing on those planes, which gave me this problem right here, I'm going to say, screw that. I need the volume of the rib. And trust me, my friends, if you have problems in this area, it's because you just focused on planes. You didn't get the sweep of that rib. Get the sweep of that rib, and so much will be made easier. Especially because in the back, I have a special form I use. Okay, I'm going to separate the volume of the rib. See, I'm undoing all that work I did earlier. And let's make sure it's still one head. Yeah, it's getting a little thin, but it's okay. I should have this flare out a little bit more. Now let's come in with this pelvis and say, there's my, what's our grid? Yeah, so this is ASIS right there. That's a bit of a problem. I'll explain it here in a second. We're going to cut the belly down. Cut across. This is going to be the cylinder of the stomach. But in order for me to get the pelvis, I have to really, there's a lot going on the side. So I'm going to get the volume that we kind of talked about. Ooh, we definitely will talk about here. The tire. Now, hurts my eyes to look at this. And always I'm at the edge of anatomy. And so we use anatomy and whatnot, but I want you to just do your best to try to keep, masses in your mind as a primary. I mean, already I'm putting the TFL in and stuff like that. But if you put anatomy in, you want it to be as a stepping stone to get the volume, not to put the anatomy, because we're heading there, but we're not there, okay? What brush are you currently using? I'm using my clay brush. Okay. I'm going to part the legs a little bit, put the pubic, the dancer belt, and so now what's the form concept that we want for the legs? And you can see it right over here. It's just a cylinder, right? That's all we're kind of working with, is kind of a tapered cylinder. So what we really need is just a tapered cylinder right there. And Now I got to sculpt it, right? So I'm going to say, try to sculpt this end point. And this, you see I'm actually sculpting the cross section at the top. And then we can, I'm just going to flatten that. That's not right. It should be straight. There you go. Okay. There's going to be a forward arc to it. I'm not thinking adductors. I'm thinking the volume and that forward arc. I'm thinking of the triangle right there. I'm thinking of this box of the pelvis. Okay, within range, right? And then now the stomach connector. Which you have to be very careful. The external oblique can, I mean, pretty soon you're like, there's tire, right? That's a total, Spider-Man's not like that. We're just taking this plane. I'm going to make sure there's a nice curve to it. We're going to come on down. Then we're going to take this and move this in as well. Cool, like that, right? These volumes becoming planes. Let's get the wedge. Let's get the scapula mass. The scapula tilts forward. Then for the neck, I like to create a hillside. And then the neck is a cylinder that kind of comes out of that. All right, now the arm, same thing that we did with the leg, where what we want to focus on is cross sections. The volume for the arm can be a cylinder. That's totally fine. But I tend to prefer to have it be a cube. So I prefer relatively clear planes. And of course, I sculpt the planes, I sculpt the form first. And then we establish the width, the measurements, and all of that. Okay? And now, a lot of people, myself included, will then struggle with the massing up here. And so, for me, the easiest thing for us to do is to continue the planes. And it's counterintuitive, but once you've done it a few times, then it's like, oh, this just, like, it just works. Oops. And then the wedge of the lat and the surratt and all of that. Okay, any questions about this? How are we doing? You can adjust the posture a little bit, get a little bit, but I think I have a lot of great volume and planar information here. Probably the only thing missing now would be the pec. And the pectoral mass I like to treat as, just like everything else, as a volume first. Now we're getting into structural massing. All right, something might be wrong here, but I think I'm okay. You guys see any mistakes? Voila. All right, let's pause, let's save this. Are we in March? All right, let me check. What is the measurement for this Scapula, I think. Specula bone. What's the specula? What would you call this stage? Is it block out or building form? So what you just saw, I don't like to use those words. What you just saw from me was you saw the massing into structure. We created the masses, and through planes, we started to move into structure. And now you see structural massing. So volumetric massing to structural massing. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Okay. Now, this is our goal, right? Now let's get some better geometry. This is not very good for any movement. So I'm gonna Z-remesh that. And it went from 20 to 10. I think that's okay. Yeah, and then I'm gonna unfreeze. So I keep my sculpt. Okay, great. So now we'll go to this lower subdivision level, and I will use mask lasso. And what's the first thing that we're noticing? What's the first thing we should do? I think, let's put pure ref up here if you don't mind. Okay, there we go. Scapula, what's the measurement of the scapula? It was right there with the 2 head. Let me go, yeah. So you see 1 head, right? And then the nipples are right there at 2. So you could see right about there should be the bottom of the scapula. And that really means that you got about 3/4 the head going up, roughly. Okay. Floor. I like to adjust the pelvis first. And I need a view. Let's turn perspective on. And he's got a lot of perspective. So let's go 3. Let's try 28. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna go into document and Z-app link, I'm gonna hit front. So it stores that, so I can always go back to that view. And that means I probably, I'll put this down here. And then hopefully I can still get to, no I can't. If we put it here, I can still get to it. Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. That'll work. So that's going to be roughly the view. Now, I'm going to pose him. Okay, so we're close there. Mask off. 1 leg. Symmetry off. Don't want to mask off the butt. That's a pretty good clean mask. Invert that. I like to use transpose. You can use gyro if you want, but for me, I like transpose. And this way I can kind of put it inside the bone, like itself, which is kind of nice. Okay. We're gonna have to move that out. There you go. So what's his leg doing? I mean, order of operations to me is always really important here. I think he's lifting. That might work. Okay. Let's get this guy. And that is basically the same. He lifts the legs and then opens them. Yes, we're going to get ourselves in trouble right away. I love it. Okay, there's a little rotation I feel like is happening here. And there. All right, I think that's a better position. Okay. Now, how do we get ourselves out of trouble with the pelvis here? A couple questions. Rick, so it's better to sculpt than pose? Well, honestly, I don't, it goes either way. I like the idea of showing you guys this because even if you sculpt and then pose, you actually still have to, you lose a lot. You still have to sculpt. So you'll see here in a sec. And Emmanuel, why not pose first? There's two reasons. One of them is, first, I wanted to show you guys the volume and the structure from a sphere, right? So it was an educational goal to show you guys that, because it's much harder to show you that in pose. I wanted to show you first what the structures are. Now I'm going to pose it, show you how it all goes to hell in the handbasket, and show you how to reestablish it, if that makes sense. Okay, so then, and then now I would say, let's get that lumbar. Yeah, let's get that lumbar twisted. And I'm going to do it in stages. And then I'm going to move the rotation so it happens here in the chest. There you go. And there's some extreme rotation happening there. blur it. I'm going to first try to get that rib and then see if I can explain why it's a certain way. I'm getting there, right? I need to go a little bit more crazy. And I wonder, yeah. Get document, close, there you go. Yeah, we're not doing too shabby. It does look like there is a little bit of rotation, a little bit of movement like that. I don't know if there is any twisting. Is there a twist? Kind of is, but not a ton. Okay, do you think I got it? I think we're a little bit there. Let's go ahead and clear front, clear back, and then just set front again. Voila. Okay, hey, can you show his history once he swaps back? It'll be all right. Okay, tell me, how's this? Okay, let's show the history. So this is me. I'm just, and you can see it here, I'm changing the point of rotation. So initially, I was just rotating the lumbar section, and then I started to rotate the chest section, lift it, and then twist it. All right, so the question is, how am I doing in terms of the perspective? I think there's less perspective than I thought. Yeah. All right, what do you guys think? Am I close? Okay. Let's get document back to front. This leg is not accurate, so let's fix that real quick, and then I think we need to move on to establishing structure again. Hello. And I'm gonna just move that up and just move that out. Let's get the neck real quick. Looks like he's looking down a little bit. Okay, we're going to slight change. Voila, there you go. And I'm just gonna move that over a little bit. We haven't done the shoulders yet or got any of that stuff yet. And we'll get there in just a second. Right now what I wanna do is focus on this whole area. Okay, so I could have it right, I could have it wrong. It doesn't matter now. Let's just go in and do what we can. So we need, I'll remember to turn the camera back. This phase is hard to teach because we use anatomy to find volumes, but we hold volumes in our mind, because when you sculpt the volume, it like a lot of things die. All right, so I'm going to use some anatomy, but I want you to remember I'm thinking about the block inside, and I'm going to do my best to try to communicate that as well. But it is a fascinating phase here for us to try to figure out, because what's happening is technically that looks like that's the box, and then that would be the box of the rib cage. And so now what we need to do, and you can see it because his genitals, like, where's it? Basically, I think the box of the pelvis is like that, right? And then his lumbar, there's some compression in there. So maybe it's even like a little compressed like that. And the ribs are flowing in, but you can see they have kind of given us some distance in there. So part of that is that they have stretched it to not be realistic, because realistically there would be a lot more, like this would be a lot less elegant, right? And so I think there's stretchiness, and we need to sculpt it so that the pelvis is about like that. Rib cage is about like this. I'm actually kind of okay with. And maybe even we need to get a little bit more concavity in here. Not quite, but I don't think it needs to push out as much, right? So volumetrically, I'm going to first go in and try to pull this back and pull the volume here back. That was the bottom of the pelvis. So again, normally I wouldn't do it like this. I would just, with the clay brush, I would just start to sculpt a little bit. But I'm going to do my best to kind of show you the intellectual journey as much as the craft journey. Okay, that's going to be the lumbar spine. The back of the ribs are going to kind of do that little doohickey. And then this is going to flatten a bit. Let's see, did I screw it up? No. It's looking not half bad. Okay, but we do need to separate the legs now. So now I'm going to get in and do some sculpting. I'm ignoring the legs at the moment, and I'm going to focus on the pelvis. Yeah. Fold the belly. ASIS. Genitals. Buttocks. You can really go from genitals, you take just a strap all the way back. You can take that all the way back to the sacrum. And then the butt cheeks. The adductors are going to come out of there. Right about there, that's going to be where the adductors are. So now I'm starting to think of anatomy. Or structural massing, really. And then after that, the fat pads of the butt. But it gets hard figure all that out. So you want to maintain that idea of the gluteal massing as a tire. To kind of help. And I haven't sculpted this pose before, so this is kind of all new to me. In this area, there's a lot of interpenetration, so I'm going to do my best to kind of like ignore it, but at a certain point, I'm probably going to have to re-topologize. Okay. Massing of the adductors. Rectus femoris and quads, the cylinder. Right there, this is, I have the cylinder already intact, so now this is the vastus lateralis, and then there's going to be hamstrings that are going to come underneath. Okay. Let's get that up a little bit. Let's get this up a little bit. See how it's, I've lost that. Now this is going to be a little compression. And we really want to check that view. And we say, okay, what's happening in this view is the external oblique is going back, and then the abs are coming in front. So that's all that is. It's just knowing, like, you know, what they must be prioritizing something. What are they prioritizing? And here they're just prioritizing abs. One form, another form, and right there. So now that's my structural massing. And then this too. External oblique. I'm thinking a lot of anatomical words, but always I'm trying to remember what's the volume. And in a pose like this, you know, I'm going to lose the plot as often as anything, so check your cross sections. Okay, so I'm going to undo that, but it tells me I need to shift. Yeah, there you go. Before I'm sculpting the anatomy, I'm sculpting the volume. Is this making sense how it is volume, you know, that I'm working on? Or is it still confusing? Yeah. Now, this is great. So there is a fundamental problem. Let's draw it out. That's the pelvis. Okay, but look where that leg is. Is that the proper place? Because if we look at this, we say great trochanter should be right there. And then, so now the structural massing should be, the volumetric massing should be an extension of the bone. But we've got this shifted too far forward, right? And so now, thankfully I was able to get myself into a problem that, you're going to experience, all the time. This is why we need to understand the volumes, and when we understand the volumes, it's not just, hey, that's a cylinder. It's what's the hinge of that cylinder? How does it relate to the other parts, right? So if we come back in here, I keep hitting the wrong button there. We'll go down. I'm going to, how do I want to sculpt out of this? Because it's in the geometry. Maybe. Like that. Boom, boom. And we'll just get it intersecting just like that. I'm fine with that. Now, what about this guy? We have our volume. And yeah, I mean, look, that's looking okay. So again, the volume of, if we look at the pelvis, you see ASIS, pubic symphysis, great trochanter, right? Ilium to PS to sacrum, and then the leg. Okay, but you know the whole purpose of this grid, sorry, I didn't do the thing I wanted, is for us to be able to say, all right, well, it looks like the great trochanter, if you were to divide that, the great trochanter is in this bottom quadrant, which I think we did. Does that make sense? Now that volume, and I don't think we'll get to the arms, I don't think, because we're already at 2 hours now. Volumes are simple, right? You sit and you think like, all right, I just got to do the volumes. No. Volumes are like everything. So was it the rectus femoris that was off? Was it the gluteus? What was off was the volume, right? And so if I'm thinking anatomy, I'm thinking wrong. Or at least I'm thinking in a direction that makes it much harder to help. But if I can see the volume and figure out how the volume works, then I'm in so much better of a place, right? And so let's go ahead and see what we can do to kind of finish this off. Let's go. Oh, that was fascinating. And really to get this, I think, lined up is, like, it's not going to be easy because we got to get, there's the adductors in there, you know. There's going to be a lot of anatomy that really kind of helps sell that. But I feel like infinitely better about it now. All right, and so I'm going to get this line back. And that line right there, you see, somebody mentioned I did too much on the abs and I lost that. Right, and so I'm looking through here, and so if I'm going to fix the silhouette, which is one of the ways that we are taught to sculpt. We're taught to sculpt by silhouette. The silhouette is telling me the volume is wrong, right? And it's not the only silhouette telling me the volume's wrong. There's also a silhouette on the other side that's telling me the volume is wrong. So I don't want to sculpt just that silhouette and fix it. I want to solve the problem long term, all right? So I want to solve the real problem. So right here, you see, I fixed the silhouette. You see that? But what the real problem is that this rib cage, the volume of the rib cage needs to push this way. So let's go ahead and lower the subdivisions. Let's grab that. Blur it, and if we're in that view, let's go actually grab that. There you go. And so now I'm starting to kind of push that in, get this, but I'm also starting to capture what's happening on that side as well. Does that make sense? The problem wasn't the silhouette, the problem was the volume. My wife is calling. We may have to terminate this. This structural mass I'm making right here, so excited to share this stuff with you guys. This is all part of the figure sculpting add-on to the anatomy class. That structural mass, like, it's super important. I'm going to dig the armpits in. That's the intercostal arch. It's the, and when you have a figure that digs in like this, if you can capture that, it makes your life easier. Then get the rib over the top of it. Let's get the separation between the gluteus medius and maximus. Let's get a little bit of that maximus moving into the leg. Get a little bit of that maximus moving into the leg. You know, and I'm not sure, like without reference, I'm not sure I have this right either. So, time to put your Spider-Man pajamas on and take some reference photos. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Okay. And we have to figure out the poopy pants butt thing. See this weird form there, but I tell you, the human body has these weird forms, so you got to be careful. If you think something's weird, it's actually might be quite right. Okay. Yeah. Always this curve around the manubrium, and you can basically structural massing is now the order of the day. But before I get too much further, let's check volumes and see if I got cross sections jacked up anywhere. And I'd say if anything, that could probably go a little bit more in. Okay, but otherwise, that is looking pretty rock star. Let's check the rib cage. So in the case of the rib cage, you just have to remember the rib cage always has a front, it has a back, it always has a side, right? But then there's going to be transitionary planes. And so I'm just looking to be like, well, like, this isn't matching, you know, so that's the one thing. I might look at that side plane and just, you know, try to get that a little bit more forward. Okay. But this would be, you know, close to us getting our kind of structural block intact, you know, to start to create this character. With our volumes relatively there, enough going on. Do we want to risk the shoulders? All right, now tell me, guys, while I got you, what are you picking up? Like, what's been useful in this session while I'm doing a little bit of maintenance work? What's been useful? What's been not useful? I'm going to grow the mask, and then that blurs it all by itself too. All right, let's just mask one off. It's a bit of a disaster. It's like, this is, you know, I'm just trying to fail in front of you guys. Darker cry and slack ears. Great. All right. Now, what part of you is talking? Visionary, realist, or critic? Because as you sculpt that same voice that you're giving me, that same voice is talking to you, and it's actually probably louder when it talks to you. So are you thinking negative space, this, da, 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 da. Okay. At this stage, if the inner critic is talking, then it's just harder. You know, there is a stage, but I sent him out of the room. So it's a guarantee this is off, right? But I have to think of it in terms of mechanics and what's working, not what's not working. You cannot do those things at the same time, you know, because one voice talks and one voice is more powerful. So you want to look for what's working, not what's not working, until we pause for a second and say, all right, now, Francesco, you got 10 seconds. Tell us what's wrong, then get the hell out of Dodge, right? Like, that's really important. You don't want that voice in the room with you all the time. All right. Dun, 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 dun. I don't like... I need that whole thing. All right, let's go here. I'm going to find that roughly in the head of the humerus. Move it up. And everything goes up, right? But when you lift your arm above your head, the clavicle's normally here. The clavicle's going to go there. And then the arm can go up. So knowing that, I just know I'm going to move this whole piece like this. And it's forward. So, you know, I know there's a whole bunch of crazy here. I just need to I need to think about my volume, clavicle to the acromial process, and it's actually pulling forward a little bit. So I need to move that volume on both sides. Now make sure, if this is one head, I don't know if I checked head measurement. Is that one? Yeah, it is. The clavicle doesn't change its measurement. You want that to be 0.75, and it is, it's fine. So if you look all the way up here, 0.8. So that's fine. And it's close to the head, which is what they wanted. All right, so let's see if we can figure this nonsense out. So what are the volumes that I need to be mindful of? We need that clavicle to go up. And then I need the rib volume. That needs to be in my mind. So from that, then the arm volume, right? And then what's all this stuff? That's all the stuff that everybody really like freaks out about. But that's the stuff you just have to pay no mind to. Like, I don't even know what it is right now. And I don't care. What I care about is that sidewall of the rib cage. You see, I got it. From here to here, sidewall of the rib cage. Can you all see? Now something's up with that neck, right? And this is again why it's like you can't, in my view, you can't see you can't see too many of the problems, because frankly, there's so many problems you'll just get overwhelmed. So, you know, do yourself a favor. Looks like I'm dealing with anatomy, but I'm not. I'm thinking of that volume of the rib right there. Trying to get the angle right. Yeah, there you go. And yeah, I think that's accurate. Okay, not done. Now I got the arm. And just like we did before, you just want to extend the plane. Let's put the plane about like that. And the plane about like that. And then, you know, like, how do I say it? Volume, but then that volume is broken from these views. So this is why it's a volume, not a silhouette. If it's a silhouette, then, you know, you won't get that right. It'll take a while to get right. If you have a volume, then you can make it right much quicker. Okay, let me stop right here. How are y'all? You good? Still with me? Still, like, you know, I haven't lost you in crazy, you know, maybe I'm not blind. It's like it didn't suddenly start to suck. Actually, that is the plane of the bicep right there. And that, I think, needs to go back. How is that volume? Imaginik. How are you, my friend? Hope the sculpting today has been going well. I'm working on the foot module of the leg. Okay, cool. Good, I'm glad you're liking ZModeler. Okay, whew. I'm getting tired. This is a lot of work. Mental work. Okay, how's my volume? Volume of the ribs coming in here, and this guy, and then the scapula mass. Okay. So the arm right now, especially if you look at it this view, let's get rid of the head. We're going to look at from this view. So you have clavicle to chromium process. So there'll be a volume like that, I think. Yeah. But we do need some mass here for the scapula. Okay. I do feel like I want to move it back a little bit though. Okay, cool. Matsuri, let me look at the camera real quick. So you're basically attaching the cylinder volume to the rib volume. I am, yeah. And as, I can't read the name below, but as the next commenter mentions, this is a slow approach, right? And so, I mean, part of this is a slow approach because it's educational. So I'm breaking down each step for you. It's a lot faster once you just have it in your head and you're just, it's just a couple of strokes. But to make the strokes clear for you guys takes a little bit longer for me to kind of put it all together and, you know, all that stuff. But yeah, the point of today is volume is key, you know. And from volume, we then evolve into structural massing. So let's look at this guy. And so we have the volume of the rib cage, but then on top of that, we have the structural massing of the intercostal arch. We have the structural massing of the pectoralis, right? You have the structural massing of the abdominal muscles. And so we're dealing with volumes to structural masses, or even, you know, you could say structural volumes. The words are the same. Mass and volume is quite similar. And you could also say primary to secondary. There's a lot of ways that you can swing this, okay? But the point is that you need a diagnostic system, and if you don't have a diagnostic system, you know, it's hard. It's really hard on you, okay? Now, there's all kinds of problems with this geometry, so I'm gonna go back down, and I don't like some of the stretching that I'm seeing here. So I'm gonna just freeze subdivisions, I'm gonna keep it and Z-remesh it again. And then unfreeze. Okay, it'll be a little bit easier. So now I want to wrap this up because I think I have things to do. I have to get to lunch, and my wife is calling for lunch. I missed lunch with my daughter. That's okay. So now let's go in and wrap this up, as quick as we can. Let's give it about another 10 minutes, 10, 15. And, we're going to be where we are. I'm not going to try to finish everything. So the next diagnostic tool for me is I'm going to take the side wall of the rib up and find the armpit. Okay, and again, that's in between, so the lat is going to be right here. Then we're going to have the side wall of the rib cage going all the way up. There's the serratus, the lat, and now there's going to be the pectoral mass connecting in. Up above. Yeah, up above. That's going to be a curved mass, and it's going to be stretched. The bicep is going to flow underneath that. And I already established that front plane, right? So that's already done. Coracobrachialis is going to be a muscle coming out right there too, coming out of the armpit. And then now the lat. Where does the lat connect, right? And so this is where you get to know anatomy. So if we say the head of the humerus is right there, the lat, the teres major, I think the teres major is going to be the bottom, so it's going to be right there, and then the lat might be right there. So you just got to have a sense or have an idea of where those are, and then we start to build our wedges. So I'm going to carve in to try to find the head of the humerus. I really should find the bony landmark, so that'd be clavicle. Let's put the acromial process right there. Spine of the scapula. Scapula is at an angle now. It comes to about right there. That's the angle of the scapula, right? There you go. Now, trapezius. Moving on up that head right there. Now the lat's going to clip it, and the lat's going to come up there. But we're going to keep our armpit. And there's a hidden little, thing you might not know about anatomy, because you might be inclined to say, hey, just do a straight line, Ryan, and then you get something crazy like that. But all of our anatomy, all parts of our body are wrapped in fascia. And so a muscle doesn't go from point A to point B. What will happen is it slides like a cable through whatever sheathing is there. So if there's a bunch of wrapping like that, then it's going to slide. So this muscle is going to do the same thing. Of course, as that muscle builds up, it actually is going to cause that to kind of, it causes it to move, but that's not the case here. These guys are going to be on the inside. Where's the tricep? Long head of the tricep is going to come in here. That's a little an anatomy piece. Always confuses us. That's the long head of the tricep. Needs to go just like that. The lat needs to go on the other side of that. The infraspinatus and all of that need to go above it. And then the deltoid needs to sit on top of all of that nonsense. And then we need let's get rid of the head for a sec. Where's the clavicle? Right there. We need the clavicular head. And this is also another reason why I create planes for these. This is why the volume of the upper arm is not necessarily a cylinder, but it's a box. And it's because then I can put the insertion of the deltoid as it moves around on top. And it fits quite nicely. And then it allows me to put the bicep in there. Does that make sense? Imagine, how much does the serratus anterior affect the look of the concavity of the armpit? Let me think about that. Let me think about how I phrase that. Flatten that a little bit, although, you know, I guess this is an older one, so. It's the older Peter Parker. It's going to be the medial head of the tricep here. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming out of that. A lot of stuff. Let me build so an armpit. I don't have it right. 1 second. There you go. That scapula mass really needs to stay on the outside. That was what I was battling before. Okay. So armpits are really fascinating. You just got to find the box, and then on one side, pec. On the other side, the lat. And then on the other side, so like if you were to draw it like that, so this is just going to be the arm. And then here, this is going to be the rib. But of course, you got the serratus anterior in here. You got a couple of other things in there. But we just think of it as a side wall of the rib. Okay. So I'm going to just expand that a little bit. Like that. There you go. Okay. All right, super dangerous doing these things live, so it's so easy to make mistakes. But hopefully, I'm giving you, as I'm making any mistakes, I'm giving you tools for thinking it through, right? And, you know, I'm not, by a long shot, I'm not done, you know, with this. I have a lot more work to do. Let's get that arm moving, and then the deltoid on the outside. Arm moving, deltoid on the outside. Yeah. So let's check. Okay. So now I might go in and just be like, all right, where else are we kind of off? And in sculpting a lot of these things, they will actually start to take liberties and start to, you know, especially if they really need to go with the stylized look. And this, getting the external oblique locked in this area is like, it's a beast, guys. So. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Actually looks like that. He wants the lat to come forward. Yeah, see, that's better. That lat really comes forward. All right, let's put the inner critic in play. Okay, so that should be right there. So these all could get pushed up. That's actually okay. That deltoid, I need to rethink how chunky that is. His head needs to probably look up a little bit. Probably tilting the head a little bit more towards me. Okay, there we go. You gotta be careful doing this though. Get that strong rectus femoris right in there. Part of the stylizing is a strong rectus femoris plane. The bottom part here, this is really straight though. And then, if you really want to mess with your brain, last thing, and this is dangerous because you can start to make assumptions. I'll show you the screen here in a second. If you're in ZBrush, you can do see-through, right, up in the upper area. But, you know, there's a lot of issues with doing this with perspective. But if you have to match concept art, like this is great because I'll see pretty quick, all right, how are my widths, right? That arm is off a little bit. But you can get yourself really bent out of shape. Like now I'm a little bit bent out of shape on this guy. And it's not, to me, I need to work towards that, not stretch him in. I say, all right, it's thicker, so I don't have the volume right. That's fine. I can get the volume just by thinking about inflate. And inflating the rib cage right there, right? There's also another trick here that Chris Costa did. You use the inflate brush and you lower your depth, so it doesn't do so much in surface inflation. And now look at that, right? Now this is all starting to kind of come together, you know, a little bit more. And that mass is actually not in the right place. Thank you, Ryan. That needs to go higher up. There you go. And then let's check. Now we're off mass a little bit here. A little bit better, but it's a little bit square. And take it on up, right? Okay. Let's take this back down. So we worked the entire way wrong, which is part of why I wanted to mention to you guys about the inner critic. Like, I got parts together, but I was off. And so in clay, you can't do this, but in the digital world, you can. And so, you know, you can always adjust the volume underneath it if you're able to think through all of that detail and you haven't gone too far, right? And so we come back here, and it's not too much to go in there and kind of give that guy a little bit more vitality versus that, right? Happens pretty quick. And it becomes a volume question. But there you go. That's what I got for you today. Now my brain is going to quit entirely. So the most important part is that you guys have tools to guide you through it, right? So you have to remember that you have processes, stages, and then you have intellectual tools. Find the landmarks, create planes, know the relationship of volumes to, each other. Where's the pivot point, of the arm? And, so I had my leg too far forward and it wasn't connected to the volume of the pelvis. Which if you're sitting there looking at it, you're like, I don't know, it's just not right. And you think you need anatomy, but you don't. What you need is volumes. And that's why I'm adding this course to my Anatomy for Artists course. And it's because I don't want you to just learn where the bones are and the muscles. I want you to be able to use that information in a way that gets you freedom to create and to sculpt from your imagination. Or from reference like this. I mean, how do we even know that that was anatomically accurate? I didn't know. All right. Do me a favor, leave in the chat one lesson you found important. I know I asked this before, so feel free to repeat that, but leave in the chat one thing. That's the only thing I ask from you. One thing that really helped you and you think is going to help you moving forward. And I will see you guys on Friday where maybe we take this guy and we start getting deeper and deeper into structure and get even more of the question of how do we make anatomy useful, right? That's the most important thing. So let me know. I look forward to it, guys. And I will see you on Friday. All right. Thank you so much for being here and spending your Wednesday with me as we kind of work through these problems. All right. Cheers.